I was 16, and I had met this kid down the street from my house. He said he saw me around and we should hang out. I figured why not? So, I gave him my number and told him to hit me up. The next week comes around and I get a text from him asking if I wanted to play basketball. Of course I did. He asked if I smoked. Weed, I did, and asked me to bring some, which isn't out of the ordinary for teenagers. I brought a couple friends, since we were going to play sports. To be honest, I was really effing stoned by the time I got there. It was a little out of our neighborhood, but it wasn't a bad hood, so I wasn't bothered. I was an idiot. It was a gang who ambushed us as soon as we got out of the car. They violently beat me and my two friends, and I got it the worst. There were 3 of them on each of us. They stabbed my best friend, not very bad. They choked me unconscious, held a gun to my head, and pistol whipped me. They ran my pockets and got my cell phone and wallet. I swear, at one point, I actually died because I literally shit myself when I went unconscious. I was drenched in my own blood. My nose was broken. Both eyes swelled shut later. They had to wake me up because I drove a stick shift and nobody could drive my car. My attacker literally had to resuscitate me in order for me to leave. I stopped at a gas station because I had shit in my pants and I couldn't see with blood in my eyes. As soon as I got in, the clerk's jaw dropped. "Where's the bathroom?" I spoke. He pointed the way. I cleaned up the best I could, then drove home. I got home, called the cops, and showered. The cops obviously thought it was my fault for being an idiot. Nonetheless, an undercover showed up and knew exactly who robbed me because we lived on the same street 2 blocks apart. Turns out they had turned him informant and he reneged on the deal and robbed the buyers in the controlled buy. I told them how violent they were and swore they would kill someone. I did a photo lineup, but they all looked the same to me. So, no case. 2 months later, the cops knock on the door. My mom was super pro-cop and told them I was asleep in my room and turned them loose on me. They woke me up and held up a photo and said, "Who's this?" Me. How would I know? I've never seen that person before. You called this person from your cell phone. Me. The cell phone that I reported stolen in a violent robbery to the police? They looked stunned and stupid. Me. They beat me almost to death. You should probably go read that police report. They apologized and explained that my cell phone had been used to set up a robbery and the person in the photo had been shot to death. Me. I told you guys they would kill the next guy. They came in blazing glory and left in shame. I have PTSD now and have kept tabs on my assailant for 17 years. I have no ability to trust anybody, not even those closest to me. I am a 21-year-old girl taking her first backpacking trip around the world. I only arrived in Thailand 2 days ago, and it was unfortunate as I almost got kidnapped on my first night. I went to Bangla Road, which is well known, and had a few beers at a bar, and then went to the popular club Illusion. I was having a good time, dancing and meeting people. In the club, I had only 3 drinks, tequila and orange juice, but at some point, I realized I was a lot more drunk than expected. Do not know if I was spiked, but I was dumb and had my drink on the table next to me while I was dancing, and it was very crowded. In total, over the space of 3 hours, I only had 2 beers, plus 3 tequilas. Usually, that is an okay amount for me to be aware. I went to the bathroom and felt very intoxicated and threw up. Upon leaving the bathroom, a guy, who I do not know, grabbed my arm. He seemed young, and I asked him what he was doing. He said he would help me down the stairs. After we got down to the road, he dragged me down an alley and put me in his car. Elle was really scared at this point and didn't know how I'd gotten myself into a bad situation so quickly. I am very small and not very strong, so it was easy for him to take control of me. He started driving, and I kept saying no, 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 and to stop, but he said, "Don't worry, I'm taking you somewhere safe," which was so scary. I had maps open, and we were driving out of Patong. Finally, after some time, I started telling him I would throw up all over him and his car if he didn't pull over. This seemed to annoy him, and he pulled over. The second he stopped the car, I got out and ran down the street. Luckily, there was a motorbike taxi who asked if I needed a lift, and I jumped on and told him where my hotel was. I could see the guy walking down the road after me as we sped away. I made it back to my hotel safely. Honestly, after that, I'm not going to any bars or clubs alone. I don't trust anyone, feeling very vulnerable. At least, it was a lesson that I need to be a lot more careful. Just glad I made it out okay. This is a short story, but it's still the scariest thing that happened to me as a child. I guess what's most chilling is I didn't realize how big of a threat it was until I was older. This happened to me when I was 4 years old, living in Memphis, Tennessee. It was around 1990, and my mom had gotten me one of those kid-sized electric cars that children can ride in. They run on batteries. At that time, this toy was top of the line, rare, and I was ecstatic to get one. Because I was only 4, I don't really remember the specifics or how I was allowed to ride the toy car on the streets, but I'm assuming there was an adult supervising me until maybe they were distracted or had to leave me momentarily. From my memory, it was a suburban area with small streets and very light traffic. I don't remember if I was on the road or the sidewalk, but I ended up on a street a couple blocks away from my house. But I wasn't scared. I was just having a blast, riding my new toy up and down the street. And then I remember a white van that came to a stop right next to me, and a man leaned out the window and smiled at me. I remember it was a big old grin that showed all his teeth. He then proceeded to talk to me, although I don't recall what he said. I also remember not being frightened because he was being nice. I just felt a little wary because an adult was speaking to me, but unaware that this man was a danger, and I shouldn't be speaking to strangers. Then I remember the man getting out of his car and motioning me to come closer to him. I hesitated, not because I was afraid, but more because I didn't know what to do. I was taught to listen to adults, so I did start to move closer to him. He motioned me to come closer and started to head towards the back of his vehicle. When I didn't move from my spot, he came closer and held out his hand. That was when a woman opened her front door and walked out. It was a house right in front of where I was standing. I don't think the woman's intention was to save me from this stranger. I think she just happened to leave the house then. Suddenly, I noticed the stranger head straight back to the driver's door close it, and speed off. Honestly, I didn't think much of it because at that age, I never registered it as a threat. So, I just got back in my toy car and drove back to my house, and I never told anyone in my family. Now as an adult, whenever my mind wanders to that day, I get shivers down my back. I think about the random woman who probably saved my life just by walking out her front door, and how different my life would be, or I can't imagine what the man would have done to me if he was able to kidnap me, but I have no doubt that was his intention. As a child, you are afraid because you don't know the horrors that await you. As an adult, you're terrified because you do. To the man in the van, let's not meet again. Ever. This story happened in 2011 while I was a college student. I went to a university in rural Michigan. If you were off campus, you were basically in farmland. I worked at a tanning salon for the 4 years I attended school, which was pretty far off the beaten path. Morning and night shifts we worked alone, and afternoons were always with one other person. All of the employees were petite females ages 20 to 23 years old. One afternoon, I was working at the salon with a coworker, and a man who seemed to be in his early, mid-30s came in. I immediately clocked this as weird because of 1, his age, and 2, his appearance. I would say about 90% of our clientele were female college students, and they were all either tan or at least trying to be. This guy was pretty pale and overall just didn't fit the aesthetic. On top of all of that, something about this guy made all of the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, which confused me because he wasn't actually all that creepy looking, but something about him was so off. He was trying really hard to be charming, but it came across as invasive, like he was interviewing me about my personal life. He never signed up for any sort of package, so I never got his name, and just chalked it up to him being an awkward guy. The next morning, I was opening the salon solo. I remember it was a weekend morning, because I felt like I was the only person awake in town. For context, the salon was a perfect square. The back and front door were connected by a long hallway, and on either side of the hallway were all of the tanning beds. I'm not sure why. Paranoia, I guess. But I would always keep the doors locked until the first customer arrived when I was opening the salon. This particular morning, the same guy from just the day before sped into the parking lot and pulled his car up parallel to the front door of the salon, leaving his driver's side door wide open. He then walked up to the front door and tried to open it. The entire time, I was standing in the middle of the hallway, so we were quite literally staring at each other. But when he pulled the door and realized it was locked, his facial expression changed to defeated. He kind of slumped his head and then quickly turned around and walked back to his car and drove away. I thought this was so weird that I wrote down the make, trike, model of his car and license plate number just in case something else happened. But I never saw him again after that. I started listening to true crime podcasts in 2020 and learned about Israel Keys. When I looked up his picture, I got full body chills. Staring back at me was the creepy tanning salon guy. Apparently, his mother lived about 3 hours from my campus, where he was known to frequently visit her, and I was his perfect target. All of the employees at the salon were a soft-spoken 21-year-old, 5'5", 120-pound female, alone in an isolated area. I often think to myself, what other explanation could this guy possibly have for what he did that morning? As quickly as he realized the door was locked, he was out of there. And I know for a fact that he saw me as we didn't break eye contact and were only about 10 feet from one another. Usually, a customer would do a little wave, or talk through the door, or motion for me to unlock it while smiling. And then, for him to never be seen again. I don't think there's any denying that he had nefarious intentions, but I'm so extremely grateful that I was lucky enough to never have to find out